So that's sort of the framework that this began from. And it's really organic right now. We're just letting this sort of evolve organically. And all of you are part of that organic process right now. Just by being here, we're really curious, all of us, I'm very curious to find out, be informed by you of what you think that dialogue is. So I'm going to just quickly frame the conversation a little bit, and then we'll give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. So if you're familiar with the concept paradigm, the talk is called the new paradigm of business. So paradigm is sort of a really all-encompassing word. It doesn't mean any one thing. It means the whole set of undercurrent, like everything, like the conscious and unconscious values, thoughts, processes, systems that make up essentially a reality, you could say, almost like a mythology. We live in a paradigm where a lot of things are just assumed, right? The business paradigm just assumes a lot of things automatically. Just by entering that paradigm, you're automatically assumed that you're going to be cutthroat, that you're going to crush the competition, that you're going to make profit at all costs. There's a lot of assumptions just by entering that framework. And myself, I've always had, just in my own life, my own experience, I've had this experience where I kind of didn't want to be part of business because of that, but I also like business. I actually like the way it works. Because at the end of the day, I've examined a lot of other systems, and you get things done. When I sit down at a business meeting, we go in, we set an agenda, people get delegated responsibilities, people are held accountable, and things happen. And it's very effective. And about 3 years ago, I left and started to work a bit more and offer my services to nonprofits. And the nonprofit sector is people who are so much more inspired, and they give so much more often. They work harder than business people. But often, because of the nature of that system, the results don't always seem to be adding up. And also, there's so much risk adversity in that environment, right? Because you can't take risks. Business, and that risk, if you take a risk, sometimes it wins, sometimes it loses. That's what venture capital is about, right? So we'll invest $100,000 in this to make $1 million, right? And sometimes they win and sometimes they lose. But when they win big, right? And something becomes widely successful. So, but nonprofits, by their very nature, they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to take risks. And so that becomes a restricting system. And and then there's charities, there's a couple other systems, but there's a new idea that's coming out that's evolving over only the last 10 years or so. And in the US, it's called VCorps, you might have heard of, or VCorps or benefit corporations. In Canada and British Columbia is about to lead Canada. I have a blog on all this if you want to read it, but it's called CCC corporations, which will be community contribution corporations. And they're also known as social ventures. And so it's kind of like a business that's going to do good for people. So, quick example that you all might be familiar with is Tom's Shoes. Have you heard of these guys? You familiar with them? So you buy a shoe, you give a shoe. Simple concept, everybody gets it, right? I buy a pair of shoes, this company then turns and gives a pair of shoes to somebody who doesn't have shoes in the developing world. Makes me feel good. Makes me feel like I'm contributing to the world, and I get a pair of shoes. It works. So there's a lot of companies that are starting to realize this works. But it's still, and hopefully everybody has this, and if you don't, you can grab one. But if you look at the back, this is sort of one of my favorite charts right now in my life, it's the innovation adaptation curve. Has anybody read the book called The Tipping Point?
Yep.
You read The Tipping Point? So they talk about the tipping point is that point where everything shifts, right? So you start off and it's a very small group, so the innovators. So according to my research, less than 1% of, there's millions of companies worldwide, and there's only tens of thousands that have registered as social ventures or VCorps. A very small number, we're probably at less than 1%. So we're in the innovation phase, right? We're still in transition time. So we're in the innovation phase. However, with the introduction of government law, right, when the government starts to recognize these companies and give them space to operate, my sense is that's when we're going to get a lot more early adopters. And if you see that number grows quite a bit, it goes from 2.5% from a very small group. The early adopters about 13%. If we had 13% of companies doing that, that would be changing a lot of things very quickly. And then you have the tipping point, the chasm, as it's described in this. And this is a gentleman sociologist who developed this curve in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe.
I remember.
Yeah, 70s, yeah, so it's, yeah, back then. You remember meeting the guy? So that's when he introduced this. And if you read at the bottom, the thing that you have to think about, the thing that we have to remember, is trying to convince the masses of a new idea is just completely useless. It's completely useless. Don't even bother, right, is what this is saying. Is what you need to do is you need to convince the innovators, and then get the innovators to shift the paradigm to get the early adopters. And then the early adopters will then create the tipping point. And so these cycles tend to, cycles of everything tend to go, in the past, take a long time. But we all know we're living in a highly accelerated world. So the tipping point, in my opinion, could be really close. If we just get past this initial hurdle that we're at, past this innovation phase, we could have early adoption just take off, and then a tipping point come very quickly. And the public wants this. So there's a report that was released 1 year ago, next month, called the Cone Report. And it was the largest report ever done on social ventures, the first major study. They asked 10,000 people in 10 countries. And what's really interesting with this report is they didn't just do it in the US and Canada and Britain. They did it in BRIC countries, right? If you're familiar. So Brazil, India, Russia, and China. So they really went and looked at the world. And they said, what do you guys think businesses should do? What do you think business should be about? And get this, 94% of the people surveyed said businesses should be about more than just profit. 94%. Only 6% of the people on this planet, according to the study, of course it's a study, but I don't know, my own experience is that probably only 6% of people, probably less than I know, but 6% of the people in general think companies should just make money at all costs. So, but that's the paradigm. That's the paradigm, right? So, what is it going to take for this innovation to spread? And how is that going to happen? And where are we at? What's going on right now? And so that's kind of where I'm hoping to start the dialogue, and let sort of our panel and you kind of decide where we take it from here. And what can we do in our city? Because we're very fortunate, we live in a unique city. The market is very strong here. If you look at companies that are environmentally focused or socially, supportive, I mean, they do really well in Vancouver, So what is it that we can do to participate in that dialogue more effectively and start to work together more collectively as well? Because as we know, part of the reason this dialogue is happening at Open Space, because Vancouver is very much isolated, right? People work in their silos. I work in my nonprofit doing my thing, or my business, or doing my firm here and there, and we're all disconnected. And because of that disconnection, things can't happen. So if we create better connections, then we build this curve more effectively. We can be part of that innovation, driving that innovation. So that's where I'm hoping to sort of start our dialogue. And by the way, I didn't even introduce myself. Geez, I jumped right into it. So my name's Elias. Just for a little bit of my background is I was actually born in Vancouver, and so I grew up, and my parents were actually completely alternative. They were total hippies. They didn't like business, and so as a teenager, being rebellious, I went to business. So like the opposite, right? If you have business, your parents are like corporate people, you become like a total hippie. I went the opposite. My parents were total hippies. I became like a corporate guy. And I went the opposite way. I studied business in school, in college. And but I always had this sort of thing with the business world. 1 foot in, 1 foot out, kind of, I'm also an artist and I do a lot of creative projects. But I went really full in for about 7 or 8 years, and I worked with some of the biggest corporations on the planet. And I worked very, very high levels, senior management levels. And then around 4 years ago, I just said, I can't keep being part of the system anymore. And I left. And I've been seeking a sort of new paradigm business ever since. So I've been there, but I know how they work from the inside. I've been at very, very high levels in management in those companies. So I understand how that works. I also understand how nonprofits and charitable organizations work. And so what I do now is I kind of doing the same thing. I'm 1 foot but I only want to work with social ventures. So my personal commitment is I will not take, doesn't matter how much somebody offers me, I'm not going to take a contract unless I believe in the product and the business. And that's what I'm doing to take a stand in my own life. It doesn't matter. So it's scary, right? Because there's not a lot of money. I can make more money working for, the mining company or promoting the pipeline, a marketing guy. I could be promoting the pipeline right now, making a ton of money, right? That's where the money is. But that's not where I want to be. So I've taken a personal stand in my own life to make sure that I'm only going to participate in things that I believe in. And there are opportunities for that. There's great nonprofits, money is less, but there's some great companies out there that are social ventures that I've been fortunate to work with. They couldn't make it here, but they want to be here. Another one is Lush. With Lush Cosmetics. They're amazing. They're a total, very successful business. And yet they do amazing activist work as well. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I don't want to hog the time. I want to turn it over to the panel and then to you. So we're not going to get a chance to meet all of you individually, because there's still enough of you, we can't do that. But we're going to introduce the panel along the way, and then we'll start a dialogue. So